that I don't know that anybody's really thinking too much about stuff like that. I just thought I might share that tip, you know.
It's 6:01. I'm going to go ahead and admit everyone and just play that that promo video that I gave you, Ed.
Yeah, perfect.
You guys do a great job, man. Awesome stuff.
Roy, that's a beautiful picture, man. Really cool.
We got a pretty good group in.
Yeah, you got 18 in right now. No, with the analytics data from you, Kristen, I'll add you to the this little montage too.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Appreciate that.
Yeah. All right. Well, welcome everyone to our post regatta debrief. We're going to jump right in.
All right.
Starting off with, oh, go ahead, Ed.
Yep, I'll go and jump in here real quick. Looks like we have a pretty good group in here. I had a few technical difficulties, so I'm still doing some other stuff, but Roy can host if we need to. And basically, we had an awesome weekend on the water, and Roy got a lot of great things to learn from, which we've already seen some of it in the first two debriefs. And so we have a couple of the pros that have offered to share some more specific things on what they did to get the results that they did. Anyone else, we obviously want to have you join in, but if you can do any questions on the chat box, that'd be awesome. And then we have Kristen Berry that's going to do a little bit of the charted sales. So we see some of that tool is valuable, and we can extend that on more because it comes off your Velocitech if you don't have a tracker. And right now, I think we're going to start off. Robbie Brown is not only a sailing coach, but he's also a local DIYC member. And so why don't we jump into Robbie real quick, and he's going to talk a little bit about some local knowledge. His team won the last race on Saturday. And, I think as we showed in some of the debrief on Saturday, a lot of the top guys were even, commenting that, they didn't know what the right thing was to do other than try to stay on a lifted tack. So Robbie, you want to jump in now and start talking about, what you can share with local knowledge DIYC so other people can learn from it. Robbie?
Yeah, so, the first thing I'd remark about as far as Davis Island is concerned is I was suspicious of that forecast both Saturday and Sunday. And the reason why is it usually doesn't blow that hard out of the east. It usually goes towards the east and drifts farther to the south and goes super light and gets very funky like you guys have seen it do out there before. That being said, on Saturday when that northeasterly started blowing, I had a debrief with my team and I'm like, look, you got to trust me a little bit. I've won a J24 midwinters here, almost won a couple others. I'm from here and I know this direction pretty well. And there are some things that you can draw from it. And the first thing that we talked about with my team was, you had to be a little patient. Either side could win, as you guys all saw on any given leg, depending on what was going on. But there were some reasons to favor one side over the other. And in general, we really work hard to keep our options open to protect the right, especially because we thought the current data was telling us there was incoming current in the channel over there where it's much deeper. So as you get up the leg in the northeasterly, if there's incoming current, you can get a really good boost. So one thing I said to my team right off the bat is, we're much better off bailing at the boat than getting pinned to the left. And I think that's a pertinent thought for all of us who aren't, you know, Willem and Victor and feel like we can burn anybody off boat speed wise. And, you know, when it's shifty like that, you got to be really careful. One race, we sure enough decided we'd try a lured in start, and we got pushed all the way to the ley line. And the conversation in the boat was, well, win your side, win your side. And my comment was, I sure wish I was on the other side. Because it was one of those legs like Victor and Jonathan talked about, where, you know, the lifted tack, the closer tack to the mark was port. You know, it would have been much better to have started at the unfavored end and got on the lifted tack right away. So I really liked Victor's observation about that. That works a lot of time, get in the uncrowded end, and you're able to get on the lifted tack and stay on the lifted tack. And in Tampa Bay, that works a lot. The other thing I would offer about Tampa Bay is a lot of time the wind is going right on Tampa Bay as these systems push through. But it's rarely a situation where you tack and go all the way to the right. I saw Victor make that work beautifully in one race on Sunday. I think he laid it in one tack perfectly. God bless you, Victor. But that's not always the case. You're usually staying in phase and working up the right side more often than just going to one side. And really, like those guys observed the other day too, you know, be really careful about getting in the soft middle. You know, if you got a really solid breeze line, you can cross the middle, but there's a couple times in our boat where I'm like, I really want to tack, but there's just not enough breeze. We have to get to more breeze before we can tack. And, you know, aside from sailing the closest tack to the mark, just know what the lifted tack is. The race we won, I thought we won because we went longer on starboard than most boats had been going up to that point. And I think the fleet was a little fooled that the right was paying all the time. Well, it was a starboard phase that we stuck with longer than most, and we got a nice lead on the group, and then we could extend with the leaders and got really fortunate to catch the last wind shift to win that race. We just got enough leverage to do it right at the end. But my point was, you know, the important thing, even sometimes if the leg's a little skewed, it may not be the closest tack to the mark, but sail to the breeze and get on the lifted tack. And
how would you say, you said that it was starboard favored. How did you know that it was starboard favored? What did you see on the course that made you think, hey, I'm gonna go left this time?
Well, okay, so we started off on the right and we got a solid blast out of the right and we tacked, and it was just a number that was 15 or 20 up from starboard numbers that we saw previous to that. You know, so my assumption, and that worked out well, was this is a starboard lift that we should stick with rather than thinking we need to just be on the right necessarily. And we worked it back to the left middle, and then we just stayed in phase from there. And we were second all the way around behind Bruno and Charlie and Jonathan. And we got just enough leverage. I'm telling you, it must have been the very last shift to get by him and win the race. For us, that was a big victory. You know, we were pretty happy where our program is, finishing about 10s otherwise, but that race in particular, you know, demonstrated a couple of points about local knowledge at Davis Island that I thought was worth sharing.
Excellent.
So at any rate, I tell you a couple other things I wanted to ask, like Willem and Victor. I haven't heard anybody talk about, you know, when do you blow the tack line? Are you, as soon as the pole hits the bow of the boat, are you trying to turn the spinnaker inside out by blowing the tack line at that point? That's what it was assumed to me, but I'm so rusty at all this. I've taught in J80s and raced Melgises, and I had forgotten up until the end. I hadn't heard any mention of that. When do you recommend blowing the tack line on the takedown?
Do we have Victor or Willem online?
Or Zeke?
Actually, I saw Chris Stocke. Chris,
I'm here.
who's that? Okay.
Yeah,
Willem,
I'm here as well.
Cool, Chris.
let's go Willem and then Chris Stocke on that.
Yeah, so it just depends on how you're coming to the mark. You know, there's now with the wing, there becomes a whole bunch of different ways to come into both marks. And so let's say, maybe it sounds like Robbie's question is you're coming in hot on port to make a left turn. Is that what you're talking about, Robbie?
Yeah, that would be the main question. Yes, exactly.
So typically what I like to do is do a really sail a little high of the mark so I can do this big exaggerated dive down with Rich. So I'll just kind of call up, 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 and then we just do this massive big down. And anything under 22 knots, I can quite easily just pull the kite around using so I pull the sheet around with the port spin sheet. I blow the starboard spin sheet. I pull the left sheet around. I pull the clew all the way to about the shrouds on the left side of the boat. The bow guy reaches forward, and right when he grabs the center of the foot, I go pull, halyard, and then the kite's coming down, and then we go tack line off.
Okay,
So
that answers my question, and I just wonder, they used to teach to blow the tack line sooner because it would collapse the kite easier for you, but you're just not having trouble with it, I assume, is why you're not worrying about that.
I just think the kite goes down into the bucket a lot easier, the hole, and cleaner if I can rotate the kite. That way the set will be better because it's coming down the same way it's going to go up. Now, if it were now if we were blowing 30, I'd probably blow the halyard and the kite would go around and make it easier, but I'd pretty much do it the same way. I'd blow halyard maybe 8-10 feet, then I'd pull the spin sheet around, and then the kite the bow person would do the same way, except I would just take a little power off the kite by blowing the halyard.
Okay, excellent, great stuff.
But the beauty of doing the tack line last is you're guaranteed the pole's going to come in, because sometimes there's some scary situations down there, and if your pole is out, if you go tack line off first and the pole doesn't come in, you got this pole out, and it's a little bit of effort to reach forward and grab the tack line to pull the pole in, right. You're going to put it in someone's pulpit. So that's how we do it. But any chance we can maybe go to wing with the kite on the left side to make it easier on the team, we do that move, coming in, like instead of sailing deep to get to the mark and doing a Mexican, I would sail a little bit higher and then go to a wing at the last minute to make it easy on the bow team. In the old days, you just come in and do this jibe drop Mexican takedown, and it's not too bad, but it's way worse than a wing drop, in my opinion. It's much slower.
Gotcha.
Because you got the boom and the jib in the way of the bow guy. What do you think, Stocke?
Yeah. Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. No, I agree totally with what Willem said. I think one of the main points that you made was the trimmer needs to kind of set the angle for the douse. Just like you're saying, Willem. Like, I don't know, Patrick always on the last jibe into the mark is talking about, we got to set ourselves up for a drop here. And that's kind of on the trimmer,
Right.
Yeah, as far as, making sure you have enough room to squabble and, doing it early is always pretty good.
Sure. On our boat, sometimes maybe with your boat also, I think sometimes it's nice when the trimmer kind of directs how to get in there for the driver, and the tactician can kind of get his main sheet and his traveler and his backstay on, and the bow guy's getting the out haul, so we have all this sorted. Sometimes if the tactician's doing it all, what happens is he forgets the main, or we're bumping boats. I just think sometimes the communication has to be really clear, and talk to the other boats and make sure everyone knows who's got room, who doesn't, before the 3-boat length circle. So 3-boat length circle. So we're set with that. But
yeah, for sure. And I think more and more, if, we try to get the kite into the wing, like you were saying, on that windward drop, just so we don't have to like rip it around the headstay so hard.
Yeah, here's a video that Roy's teeing up a video of more of a situation. This is the probably the biggest breeze downwind. Victor and Travis were coming in at first, and they didn't have the chance to do that. But Travis, you want to jump in here and talk about what you guys were thinking, because you're pretty concerned. You doused fairly early, but not too early. But then you watch the boats coming behind and you kind of see what they do. Willem's next. Travis, you want to jump in and talk about this for a little bit?
Yeah. I was just real scared. That's all that happened there. No. Well, if you go back, Roy, and you see kind of how we were slightly to leeward of Willem's boat on the race course, and I think this was a kind of a knock coming in here, a little bit of a header, that we just couldn't get high enough to do what Willem's talking about, get the kite around. And I was kind of nervous that, that was the biggest puff of the day. My arms weren't going to be able to rip that around. So Victor did a really good thing, and it's something that I haven't done before. And he just went with a halyard first. And sure, it looks early here, but it didn't feel it like that then. But he went with a halyard first because in a big breeze, the kite just goes forward and out. It doesn't necessarily go right to the water. So if you have a pretty capable bow person, you're going to be able to pull the majority of the kite through the front of the boat before anything really bad happens. But as Victor said, or as Willem said, it was still, pull first, halyard. Well, it was still halyard this time, then pull, then tack. Tack was always last. It was more of us a little overstood to come to that left gate.
But the one thing you notice there is they still did that down, and that's, I think, what's key is no matter if you're, if you're too much breeze or too much to the middle, it doesn't matter. You still have to do that down.
You got to do it with it.
You can't control things.
Yeah. But that was our thinking, we were slightly overstood. Otherwise, we probably would have done more of a conventional takedown. Like you could see Willem, he had a little more room to dive down, and he could get the kite around. But here we still had to do a wiggle to get the kite to go forward of the boat instead of directly down to its side.
One little trick, Travis, is if the spinnaker halyard is too long, and if the halyard is blown, and what you want to do is take the head of the sail or the halyard when there's no sail on it and pull it down to the bow and make sure that the halyard couldn't go under the bow. Because It's possible to blow it in that situation. It falls to the left, and then the boat turns to the left and it goes under the bow. And now you could have a real problem. So it's just a little bit of a
right at the it's right at the block when that happens. So you're right at the cleat. So yeah, Willem, great point there.
You got to just make sure that halyard is not so long. Some halyards are so long that they can drop the mast easily, but you just got to make sure that can't happen. So what I like to do is just take the halyard down to the very knuckle of the bow, and if I pull it up about 2 inches, and that's kind of the sweet spot, which also goes into the bag, and I can tie it up how I want to, and it's super clean. But you get yourself into trouble if the halyard goes under the bow.
So you're going, Willem, you're just measuring, so you go like say 6 inches up from the knuckle or a little less.
Exactly. Yeah.
Pretty
much the head is buried about 2 feet into the spin bag. And then I can clip it with one of those ties on the mast. And that's pretty much exactly the same as if you were to pull it down and it's just above the knuckle. So, But what you could also do, Travis, in that situation, if it really got windy and that was a finish line, you could obviously put the backstay on, but then you would roll the jib up. So if you roll the jib up, you could have, in that position, let's say the mark was a little more to your left and I was more to your left looking downwind and gaining because I'm laying and you're not. You could roll the jib up, sail 5-6 degrees higher and probably faster, and then roll it out again and bear off to go to the mark.
Right. So
that's a little trick.
Or higher in particular.
But remember, so Willem's talking about put the backstay on because when you have that much breeze, you're going to have a floppy forestay. And so it won't furl very well if there's not tension back on it. So you got to make sure there's tension on your forestay to furl.
I think he's also talking about the luff of the spinnaker as well, to be able to heat it up a little more, to have tension on the luff of the kite.
Absolutely.
More. But yeah, that's a good point too, not being able to furl.
So like if it blows 30 plus knots and you're trying to lay a finish, and you're like, oh, we got to take the kite down. We can't make it. Well, before you do that, roll the jib up and sail 6-7 degrees higher, fully planing, and then make that decision later if you can't make it.
Yeah. Cool, Willem. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So,
Awesome.
hey, I have
Okay.
one more question for you guys. Could I ask one more kind of mid-fleeter guy question? Would you guys mind?
Yeah, Robbie, go for it.
Humor me. So we were having a hard time, and first off, maybe we need newer cleats because we have a hard time adjusting the lure jib sheet. Maybe our cleats are worn out and the dang thing won't come undone when we banjo it and try to ease it an inch. But more importantly, we struggle to get it in tight enough when we're sheeting. So one of the things that we arrived at, and maybe this is just Robbie's damage control and a nice way of putting it, but I would, as the guy who's not got his legs out, I would jump both feet on the thing to banjo it, to get it to come in tight enough. And danged if that didn't make a big difference, that extra amount we were able to get it trimmed. Is anyone needing to do that, or is that just jury rigging because we're doing something else wrong, or is that not such a bad way to go? Because it sure helped to get that extra jib sheet in.
That's the way to do it, Robbie.
Okay. All right. I hadn't heard anybody say that before, but it sure made sense once I started trying it. I weigh 170 pounds, and even that's probably just barely enough to get it in tight enough, So
I think once you get the
Yeah,
once
go
you
ahead.
get the angle to the right spot to jump on the sheet is great. And so just some kind of thinking how this is working, when we put the backstay on in the biggest puffs, the leech of the jib opens up and we need to go more jib sheet. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
what
So
about,
as you put the backstay on, you got to put the main sheet on, but also the leech of the jib's opening up. So yes, you got to step on that sheet. You got to get it bone tight and all the way down. Ideally, the clue is right on that cabin top. It's tight.
and again, we really struggled to ease it that inch when we needed to ease the sheet an inch. Would a newer cleat be helpful in that situation? Our boats that we were sailing is a little bit older.
Probably yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and
But it's loaded,
We'll go into the in-hauling a little more, Robbie. That's one of the things Patrick Wilson's going to talk about later. So
Okay.
we'll get into that a little more. A real quick thing, though, while you're talking about jumping on lines and things, one thing, if you don't get your tack line out all the way, run it across to that back winch. Here's a useful winch thing. One thing the winch is useful for. Run into that back port winch and go around and cleat it, and then jump on the tack line, and you'll get it all the way in. So
Is that better than just going to the jib cleat, or would they both work?
well, you can't jump on it if it's not crossing the boat, and it's a
Well,
better
across
angle.
to the other side.
It's a
The
better
jib sheet
angle.
on the other side.
Oh, it's a better angle to go to the winch and cleat it, and then you can
Okay.
just jump straight on.
Okay, super. Thank you.
I like it your way, Robbie, and just put it in that leeward cleat and just step. It's across the boat. It's forward, but you can do it either way.
Well,
Some
as
people
a
even-
tactician, as a tactician, I don't get to do that. I'm behind the skipper at that point, so. Yeah, but that's how we had a bow girl. She only weighed 135, and finally we figured out even she could get it down if we banjoed it properly like that, like Willem is saying. So
Excellent.
Yep.
Well,
Just got to get it what works with the team, but getting it across so you can do that's the key thing. Okay, so some of these things are kind of going to overlap with what we have going on later. So we're going to jump into Kristen Berry with he's going to talk to us about what we learned with charted sails and how valuable this data is that's coming out of. We had trackers on 5 boats, and then we had a bunch of people that gave their Velocitex for data. So Kristen, you want to jump in here and you can talk more about even still getting us data.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thanks to the teams that have been emailing me their data. It's pretty easy to pull your Velocitech data ex post facto and just drop it in an email. That it's unbelievable how small the files are. So if you took your Velocitech home, feel free to send it to me. One of the things that's really cool about this information is it gets better over time. and it's pretty accessible to send it that way. We did have good tracker data that we got back, and I'm going to show some of that, and I'm also going to blend in some of the Velocitech information as well. I think some of the value of this information is, as I said, it gets better over time in a couple of different ways. One, it's a really useful benchmarking tool. As Robbie was talking about, he had confidence in his forecast. I've sailed this event at Davis Island, I don't know how many times at this point, and I was really confused when it was as breezy as it was that far right. But having this information now goes into my notebook. It appends my notebook, which means the next time we see this set of environmental conditions come together, I look forward to looking at these racetracks and trying to use that to make some suggestions to the teams that I'm working with in the morning to say, look, this is what we should be looking for. This is what worked the last time we were all here. I also think something that you'll see as we go through this is that you can really glean whether or not you had a boat speed issue or you had a decision-making issue. And, some of the boats are missing here. So sometimes you'll see a boat do something and you wonder why they did it. Well, maybe somebody was on their breeze or somebody tacked under them and we don't have that boat's data, so we don't see it. But the more data we get in, the better and richer that'll be. So anyway, just wanted to mention that sort of public service announcement wise. And there is so much information here that we could spend hours going through it. My intention is to, spend 10 or 15 minutes showing you all the tool and pulling out some of the stuff that I thought was highlight from Sunday, and also then inviting everybody to come and play around with it on your own. In the chat, I put the link to the Charted Sails session for Davis Island Day 3, and I will share the Day 2 and Day 1 sessions with everybody on the email list as well. Everything we're going to do on this Zoom call, you can do on your own. You can upload the data on your own, so on and so forth. And I'll make this pledge to any team that's on the call. If you'd like to, just spend 20 or 30 minutes one-on-one, I'm happy to schedule that call over the next couple of weeks and work with anybody to help you guys learn how to use this. I'm not directly related to Charted Sails, but I'm a big fan of the tool and the time that I've used it. All right, so jumping in here, this is Sunday, race 1, and we're looking at just 2 boats. We had 5 trackers, and then I've got 5 or 6 other Velocitech boats that we'll layer in here. But I just wanted to show you the whole race course real quick. And if you Ed, can you see my screen? Am I broadcasting here? Okay,
yep, we're good.
Great. On the left side of your screen there, you'll see that we've got this sort of information box. And what this shows is the whole race in a snapshot. Shows the 2 boats that I've pulled up, how they finished versus one another, total time on the race course, total distance in meters sailed, and average speed. It's hard to show an average VMG if you're talking upwind, downwind, especially on planing boats. So this gives you an average speed. And right away, you can see, that the boat that won this race sailed faster on average across the course. Now we can dig into this and get some really interesting stuff. So we're just going to look at leg 1 upwind here. So I'm just looking at the first leg of this race, and we'll sort of scrub through and we can watch what happens. So right about here, we're about 4 minutes into the race, and a couple of things that I think are pretty interesting to see is off of the start line, the purple boat had to do 2 tacks right off of the line. Probably had a suboptimal start. And then there were starboard tackers coming off the boat end because I think everybody thought the right-hand side was going to be favored, so that they had to tack away again. The boat in green, they had a single tack. They came off the line and were able to tack, probably ducked a couple of boats and started working towards the right edge. So we get up the beat here, and this is about 4 minutes into it, and I'll show you how I know that here in a second. And the purple boat's actually ahead at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to look at their leg here. This is the leg from the start line, roughly 4 minutes in, and we can see what their average speed has been, their VMG, and roughly what their true wind angle is. That true wind angle number probably needs a little adjustment because it's user input, meaning I declared what that wind direction was based on what the race committee had said. So that moves around a little bit, but the VMG is a good number to pay attention to here. And you can see that they've been doing 4.8 on this leg. They were on this leg for 4 minutes. If we go over and we look at the other boat, roughly the same thing. They're on this leg for about 4 minutes. Their VMG is 4.1. So, you know, the purple boat looks like they're going to be legging out. And in fact, they are a little bit ahead. If you imagine, and I was using like a ruler, if you just take a book edge or a credit card or whatever, you can put the ladder rungs on the screen here by dropping down from that top edge. And you can see that the purple boat's clearly ahead. If we look at the whole leg, we can scrub through here and watch what happens. So as these boats are going upwind, the boat on the right came over here. They found a little bit of a right shift there. There's a little knock of a left. You can see that they're a little wobbly right through there. I'm going to zoom in here just a touch. And you'll be able to see, you know, these trackers are updating at something like every 4 milliseconds or something. So you can see little small wobbles in their course as they're wandering along. Interestingly enough, the purple boat's a little wobbly. That's catapult. And you'll see here in a minute where they're actually not going to make the cross at the top. So we come in here, boom, green boat has the cross, around the top mark they go. The takeaways, I think, from looking at this data are a couple of things. One, overall, based on their distance sailed and their VMG, Catapult was a little higher and slower on this leg, but their VMG is still in the ballpark. Their average speed is just a little bit slower, but look at that distance sailed, like, you know, 50 meters less over the course of the race course, which we all know in J70s means a lot. But American Flyer is having a good leg here. The biggest difference, I think, on this leg was the fact that Catapult somehow pulled off 6 tacks and still was nearly even at the top, and American Flyer only did 2. We know tack loss is pretty significant, and in that breezy condition, I think maybe more so than average. So that was pretty cool. You can also see, you know, that the boats are sailing a persistent right shift. So again, looking at this as a tool that we can use not only to assess our current performance, but also to review in the future. Look for that righty when the breeze is out of 0.85 when you're sailing at Davis Island is a good lesson for all of us to tuck into our notebooks. And, you know, I think the other thing is that we talk a lot about how important it is in this class to get a good start, but both of these boats had midline starts if we zip back here. So, you know, they were probably playing a fairly conservative first race of the day. And maybe Catapult didn't have as good of a position as they had wanted. So they had to do a little shucking and jiving there at the beginning. And you can see that because of that, they weren't probably able to get as far right as they wanted. So if we had more boat data, we'd see if they were hipped up on somebody or stuck and couldn't tack and cross and didn't want to take the big duck. But anyway, I think there's some pretty interesting stuff to be seen here. So I'm going to close this and go out to leg 2, because this is pretty impressive. There's the whole race in a snapshot, by the way. And again, you can just scrub through on the tool and see where everybody is here. But if we get into leg 2 and zoom in to the performance here, we're going to see some pretty cool stuff. So boats come across around the top mark. The green boat, just American Flyer, takes off, and looks like, to me, Catapult may have gotten down inside of them, which prevented them from being able to jibe. But if you look at the numbers up here in the box, you can see that Catapult just puts on a clinic. Their distance sailed a little bit shorter, but their average speed is through the roof, almost, well, it's 2 knots faster, which puts their VMG more than a knot faster than the other boat. And, you know, that equates to 35 seconds on the leeward leg, which is pretty amazing. This is, for me, a revealing situation. Couple of things. One, this was not about which corner did you go to. This was not about decision making. This was just a raw boat speed. We're better at sailing our boat than the other boat is, and grinding down the leg, never relenting. And at the same time, also knowing, you know, what mode to be in. I think a lot of us at the back half of the pack, where I spend most of my time, you know, we get into those conditions and we're not really sure if we should be on that super hard plane, pushing it as hard as we can on the edge of wiping out, or if we throttle back a little bit and try to, you know, take some downs when we can. I think if you look at all of the boats across the range here, you'll see that Catapult, which legs out on this leg, their average speed is higher than everybody's all the time. And that speed ultimately ends up meaning they sail less distance and their VMG is better. So this is pretty revealing, I think, as we dig through this. Let's see here. Let's look at leg 3, and we're going to look at all the boats on this one. So here, plugging into leg 3, I'm going to show you not just these 2 boats, but rather all the boats. And you know what this shows is that the majority of the fleet thought the right-hand side of the race course was favored at this point. So you know, there's again some really good takeaways from this. If we had the entire fleet, I'm sure we'd see a few boats trying to find something on the left edge. But all the boats that we were tracking figured out that the right-hand side was paying at this point, and they're working that. If you look over here on the upwind performance, you can see that there's a pretty big discrepancy in the time it took for these boats to sail the leg. I'm going to go ahead and rank everybody from top to bottom here. So, you know, the fastest boat, Catapult, on this leg did that whole leg in 9:47. The slowest boat was, you know, 45 seconds behind them. This distance sailed, I think, is a really revealing number. You know, if you felt like you were fast, but you were sailing a lot of extra distance, you'll see that you paid for that. And sometimes that's hard to really observe while we're out there racing. You know, you got somebody who's on the rail who's calling relatives. They're calling you faster than your neighbor, but maybe they're not that good at telling you if you're sailing the same angle. This is revealing for that. Again, Catapult's VMG number on the legs, this is flogging a dead horse to some degree, but you're going to see that they really are a cut above most of the other teams for most of the day, and it showed in their final race performance. So that's race 1. I'm going to zoom back out to the whole race and just show you guys one of the reasons that I'm focusing on just a couple of boats in each one of these races is because with all of these strings, the full tails, it can get a little messy. But if you want to plug in your boat or you want to see another boat and what they did, or what we do on my boat, we mark down like magic moments on the race course where we split with somebody and we wonder how that works out. We're able to come back to that later. You know, this is really useful to be able to see if your decision making made any sense. But all of the boats on here can get a little difficult to track. So I'm going to close this and move on to race 2. And just quick sidebar, you know, everybody now has access to this information and it'll get richer as I continue to put stuff in and plug in more information. I'll share with everybody on the email list kind of my magic moments on the race course, the places that I thought were pretty interesting. But jumping here into, let's go back to race 1 or race 2, leg 1. So you can see there's relatively consensus thinking here on race 2, leg 1. People got off the line and started working their way off the line, and people are trying to get right. There's only a few boats that are getting hung out over there to the left. Robbie had talked about getting pinned and taken all the way to the ley line. You certainly know how that feels. There were lots of times where we thought maybe we should tack and take every transom we could find just to get to the right. But the boats that we're tracking were able to work to the right. And then you can see here, there's a neighborhood on the left, a neighborhood in the middle, and a neighborhood all the way to the right. And that right edge continued to be fairly strong for everybody there. Also, I think if you look up here in the performance box, you'll see in this race, maybe everybody got their tuning squared away because they were no longer caught off guard, or it had settled in a little bit. But the numbers, the disparity across the range is not quite as broad as it had been. Again, Catapult's speed and distance is pretty impressive there. But for the rest of us, let me rank everybody here. There we go. For the rest of us, it tightens up, you know, again, into those neighborhoods, and you'll see who's sailing similarly. And that's a pretty interesting takeaway. And again, there's so much information here that you're going to want to kind of dig into this, maybe do your own team debriefs and look at who you think you were next to at different aspects of the race and figure out if they were doing the right thing or not.
Hey, Kristen.
Yeah, go ahead.
So that VMG, is it always towards the mark, or is it trying to calculate any wind angles from the angles that you're sailing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's taking, and I think Thomas is on here. He can, he's the charted sales, the man behind the curtain on charted sales. He can talk about that a little more in depth. But I go in each race based upon what the race committee stated was the wind direction at the start of the race, and I tuned that in. And you know, we can, if you're doing this in a training setting, having a coach who's tracking that stuff while you're racing is really helpful, because I'm sure it comes into play. If we had, you know, I bet if we had the bot data, then we could do VMG to the mark. But right now it's using the wind that I set, and it's not tracking that as we're racing. Obviously, that's set globally for the race. And Thomas, please step in if I'm misrepresenting that.
No, you didn't. No, that's correct. So the velocity here is the velocity made correct to the course. VMC might be more correct, but I think when you're looking at a race, that's really what you care about, because you want to compare your speed to the mark, and that's what the VMG is telling you, giving you here.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
All right,
and Kristen, we can get that bot information, you know, as we get into this a little more, we can dump that in later too.
I think bots and boats will make my mark placements a little sharper than they are. You know, again, I put those marks in there too. It's not too hard to figure out where everybody's turning, but the more precise we can be, the better the data will be. All right, so here's race 2, leg 2. And what I wanted to show here is something, and this is really useful to see all of the boats in this one is pretty cool. I think the boats that were able to, because of their boat handling, or because they came in late and didn't have a lot of traffic, the boats that were able to jibe fairly early performed the best down this leg. And I think everybody who sailed on that race knew that the right side was showing promise, and we wanted to get onto that port jibe pretty early. It was also pretty windy, so some of us extended just to keep the boat upright. And this is a leg where not only was there some boat speed differential, I'm going to rank these so you guys can see that up here in the box. Not only was there some boat speed differential, but here we can actually see in the data where there was some significant boat handling differences. You know, if you watch as Catapult comes around, I'm just going to focus on Catapult and Imperia here. If you watch, those two boats come around that top mark, and they're able to put that jibe in really quickly. I know my team didn't have that in their playbook in that breeze this weekend. And so I think it's revealing to see that. That's something to work on. Willem was talking about, you know, essentially, how are you coming into that leeward mark? What's your setup for the drop? Well, I think we got to think about that at the top mark too, where, you know, in these race courses where we've got to be able to get on port jibe fairly early, you either have to have a very impressive defend low mode to be able to hold those boats out, or you got to be able to jibe pretty quick. Surge blew up a kite on Friday, I think, in a jibe set. And so it's clearly a maneuver that we need to work on to be able to, even the best teams can foul it up sometimes. But the boats that, if I go back to all boats, the boats that extended and then jibed suffered because they needed to be on port jibe. Some teams needed to do that because they wanted to conserve the number of maneuvers downwind because each jibe was risky. But I think it's incentive for all of us to try to improve that stuff. Let's going to close that leg and zoom forward here. We're going to go to race 2, leg 4. This one was kind of cool to watch. You know, again, there's kind of consensus thinking here. One boat took a bit of a flyer there, and it didn't hurt them terribly. They went down the leg, you know, kind of nearly as fast as everybody else, but there was a lot of folks wanted to set and extend on this one. And you'll see here that, you know, the differences were really in boat speed. look at this. Like if you look at the boats that I have up here, this is just so amazing to me. The distances sailed. The first and third boat sailed pretty close in their distance sailed. So they're tracking through the same amount of water, but holy criminelli, 2 knots of average boat speed difference. That's just shocking. And it leads to a 1 minute separation of the time it takes to sail that leg. I'd give my left arm for a minute on a leg. I mean, that's just amazing to me. And I'm wondering, what's the big difference in speed there? Is it boat preparation or is it technique? I guess it's technique and not being chicken in that condition. It's just having had that experience and knowing how to, really maximize the boat there. It's also to some degree decision making. Is it time to put it on the sort of super plane and really push the hairy edge? Or is this time to shift modes and try to sail lower when you can? So I'd love to hear from Willem on that. But my guess is that in that condition we sailed in on Sunday, in general, you want to push the boat as hard as you can. There's very little to be gained on taking the downs. And, I'm not suggesting lazy plane, but, there's something between lazy plane and the hair on fire plane too. So anyway, those are worth looking at.
Yeah, Kristen, that's part of why we have Patrick that's going to talk right after this. Because I think that is the big thing is, figuring out, even though you're planing, what's happening in the lull. Are you going up hard or are you not? Or, and that's what we'll pick Patrick's brain about on, how they are this good.
Yeah. And, for the sake of time, I'm looking at my clock here, it's 6:45. I think I'd yield back the rest of my time, and I'd like to hear from Patrick. Again, I'll reiterate to every team that's out there, I am more than happy to be your guide on how to look at this data, how to dig into it on your own. That's probably just a 20-minute one-on-one phone call. I'm happy to do that anytime you guys want. Everybody probably has my email and cell phone from the emails over the weekend, but I will also be putting out sort of my race-by-race things to look at email here in the next day or so as more Velocitech data comes in and sharing that with everybody. And please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help any way I can. And I just want to reiterate how much I think this is such a cool tool that we can all improve with and benefit from. And I really look forward to seeing it in a race where decision making rather than just drag race boat speed becomes a bigger player in the thought. So thanks to everybody for listening, and look forward to seeing you on the race course.
Yeah, thank you, Kristen. That's awesome. I mean, I think that's just hugely valuable information, and we want to do more and more with this. And thank Thomas for making these trackers available and then this service available. I think the best thing for people is to start using this data themselves, and even if they're on their own. Obviously, I think it's more valuable if you can get a tuning partner. But in these situations where we can put most of the fleet in there, I think it's huge, because it's awesome that we were able to see Catapult and Imperia and some of these really good teams that are when they blow by us, we want to know why and what really happened. So Patrick, do you want to jump on and go ahead.
I just want to add one more thing, which is a special thanks to those teams that did carry the trackers. We play in a sport where some information is proprietary and teams can be a little cagey about it, but I thought it showed really great spirit, everybody willing to carry one and share their information. And we're going to be a better fleet because of that. So thank you.
Yeah. And one thing that's interesting about the tracker he's talking about, it's actually live. So if a coach is out there and he's got a couple teams, he can literally be looking at the data while they're doing it, taking notes or that type of thing. So I think that's a really cool thing. And I think it can get to a point where we're tracking even more when we, and people can watch racing and that type of thing, which is awesome. So let's grab Patrick Wilson. And, I know there's a couple things that I asked him questions of on Sunday with the downwind. And I know he wants to talk about, I think, in-hauling and that type of thing as well. But, for those, I doubt anyone doesn't know Patrick Wilson, but, he sometimes tends to be quiet. So he's obviously one of the better trimmers in this class, the world championship. And they did an awesome job this weekend winning this regatta. So one of my first questions for them was when that race that they won by a long shot, they didn't round that top mark with a giant lead, but they finished with one. So Patrick, you can talk about whatever you want, but I know one of the things that we want to kind of talk about was your modes downwind and what made you so fast.
Yeah, I think, can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, yeah, so I think there's a lot of different modes downwind when it's that windy. The specific thing you were talking about was the race where Bruno was quite close to us and we were planning downwind. There's one thing I say to Joel a lot, which is patience. I think that comes into effect when you're ripping in a big puff and all of a sudden you hit a little bit of a light spot. I think a lot of teams have a tendency to really put the bow up hard, but I think over time you can kind of figure out what's the highest I'm willing to go in this lull to kind of keep the boat going but not chase it. So, I'll talk to Stocke a lot on the bow, like how long is the duration of the lull coming? And I'll say, Joel, all right, patience, hold it at this angle. And over the long run, you tend to make out pretty good. I think you get in trouble when you start chasing the plane as you get into a lull. I think Sunday there were, it was windy, but there were also a lot of lulls. There was a lot of mode changes. Hey, Ed, I can't hear you right now.
Sorry, that's because I muted. Who was trimming with Bruno? Was it Charlie or was it Jonathan?
I think it depends on the leg.
Well, does it? Charlie or Jonathan, I think they're both on.
Yeah, I'm trimming the kite downwind. This is Charlie.
So in that leg, obviously you saw what they were doing. You still were, you guys were still launched on everyone else. I know the wind was shifty, so it's not like it's just one thing, but could you see from your boat to their boat, or what were you feeling was going on? And, how were they able to get that jump? Or was it just a battle that, it was different though? Charlie, what were you doing, in the shifts and lulls in the big breeze?
Well, I think, I was pretty interested to hear what Patrick had to say because, they're really good in that stuff, or I think, downwind all the time. I think, is a good point that he said about how much are you going to chase it up. And I think the reminder is how much you're really relying on the wind calls. So for me, I don't turn around and look that much. So I'm mostly just reporting the pressure in the kite and, paying pretty close attention to the feel and the speedo. And so I think trying to merge that with, how light for how long. And then also, I think, more so this weekend than almost any regatta I remember recently is there was times when you were in the puffs where you really wanted to go low in them because they were so short-lived and the puffs weren't really fanning across the whole course, particularly on Friday and Saturday, I would say. And so
a lot more on Friday and Saturday where you went to wing. I know there's obviously certain reasons to go to wing for traffic and that type of thing, but what were other reasons why, there are boats that came down wing for a pretty long time? Charlie, did you guys do wing a lot? I know there's definitely teams that like it better than others.
We winged a fair bit. I'd say on average, we winged a little less than some of the other top boats. We would often go where we wanted to go, jibe, get to the side of people we wanted to be on, and then wing. So that sometimes resulted in sort of having to be a little more patient. We tried hard not to wing and then have that take us slowly up into a pack of boats that are on the other jibe. So I think normally you're really just after the VMG that was talked about so much earlier that, we could all be better at tracking and understanding. But I think when the puffs and lulls are that localized, you're really looking to get yourself lined up for a good one and then take that, then run aggressively deep in that. And most of the time that means line up for it and then wing. But a lot of times it was so shifty that staying lined up for it. If you winged, that would actually take you low of the gate. And so I think if that had been steadier wind, we would have seen the boats that, you know, the higher percentage of winging was higher VMG. But when it's puffy and shifty, I think the game becomes a little more nuanced.
Yeah, Patrick, where do you think you were in the winging versus non-winging? You guys do a fair amount of it?
A fair amount. I think obviously it's always a really good tool tactically when you need it. It's also really good to mitigate kind of a loss, right? If you get caught in a big lift, you can kind of wing against the lift and kind of, you know, save yourself a little bit. One thing that Victor told me a while ago, which is interesting for Davis Island, is he gets worried about doing the wing too much sometimes because the lulls and puffs are so big that if you wing into a lull, you actually sail in that lull for longer. And I think that's something that's kind of characteristic of Davis Island only because it's so puffy and shifty, but it's interesting to think about. You know, but there's a lot of times the wing's quite powerful. It's something that every team should practice a lot because these days I can't really think of a regatta that you don't use it at least a handful of times.
Patrick, do you have a boat speed? Do you have a boat speed number that you know you're winning if you can wing and go that fast?
I would say uprange. I know that if we're doing at least 10 knots, like 9.5 to 10, we're planing is the proper call. Below that, it's definitely winging. And I think if you're not doing at least like 5 knots ish, you don't want to be in the wing. So it's a pretty wide range. You know, it's pretty much from, let's say, like 6 or 7 knots of breeze all the way up to when you're planing.
And how often is it a tactical boat on boat versus a tactical VMG?
I would say 50-50. The tactical boat on boat's more at the marks and turning corners. There's a lot of times these, you know, flat water especially, where, you know, it's a good VMG move, especially on second runs when the fleet's spread out a little bit more because the wing is a little bit vulnerable to bad air. But you know, yeah, it's got a lot of uses. And you know what we've been working on more and more too is jiving the kite into the wing. You know, for the longest time, I think we only really threw the main across, and just in the last year or two, you know, we've started to work on jiving the kite in the wing, so you can kind of go either way pretty quickly. And the more we do it, jiving the kite in the wing is almost better because you don't end up flipping the main over and having to mess with the main battens. They're already set. So I think it's a good move to practice.
Yeah. Okay. So let me grab a tactician. So we got Zeke and Jonathan, right? They're on here. Why don't we go Zeke first? Zeke, you want to talk about the tactical side of the wing? I know that's one of the big things. You know, how often are you calling for the wing because of getting separation, or, you know, of course, with these good teams, it's kind of harder to say that because they're fast no matter what. But Zeke, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me, Ed?
Yeah, I can hear you. So,
yeah. I heard your question. It's a very interesting question because I think it was interesting hearing Patrick's opinion because I probably think I wing more like for strategy with the wind than I do for other boats because the wing becomes really, really unstable when you're near other boats. And generally speaking, if a boat is so close to you that you're needing to make a tactical positioning decision because of them, you might be in conditions like we had Saturday, you might be too close to them to wing stably unless it's a really short one and you know that your escape out of the wing can be a main over. Because I think, I wonder if Patrick would agree, but probably the slowest maneuver there is out there is escaping when you're already in the wing, is escaping by doing a kite over to get back unwinged. It was interesting hearing his points. I think I try to use the wing more for strategy with the breeze. I mean, there's certainly times when you can go to the wing for a little bit to stay separated from a pack, but they should probably already be pretty separated and you're just trying to avoid getting up into them. Because I think the traffic and disturbance in the air of the other boats can make the wing really unstable when you're in this, sort of on the light side of winging. As you get a little stronger on the breeze towards the 12, 13 knots on the wing, it becomes a little bit more stable. So maybe in that condition, it's a little more dependent on the other boats. But generally, I think you want to use it in order to make progress down the course and stay in the breeze and on the headed jibe the longest.
Yeah. So let's go back to Patrick on that one real quick. Patrick, is that like, I mean, you know what's going on, but you have any times where you're like, I don't really want to jibe back out of the wing with the kite? Or, you know, is it something that's worse than the other? What's your favorite away from the wing into regular again? Talk to us about that.
I mean, yeah, I think Zeke's exactly right. Like jibing the kite out of the wing I mean, it works fine, but it takes a while, and it takes a while to build speed. I mean, the best when you get really good at it is you're in the wing and the driver heads up and you flip the boom over and you give it a little heel and you flatten the boat and accelerate out of it is by far the best.
Yeah. Okay. Can we grab Jonathan for some tactics on some of this stuff too, on when you're using the wing and not using the wing? Jonathan, you?
Yeah, I think this guy's mentioned that. I don't really have anything to add.
Okay. All right.
I guess one thing I would say from the trimmer side, and we talked about this a bit with Zeke this last weekend, is for the trimmers, I think it's good to just say when you think it's winging wind or you think it's planing wind, and then leave it to the tactician as to whether that's actually a good mode change or not. You know, like I think when you have the kite sheet in your hand, you get a pretty good feel of, is it stable enough that you could wing here? But we're not looking around enough to be able to really say whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, boat traffic wise.
Yeah, and this is probably a weekend where the wing is a little more easy because there was breeze, not like, you know, when you're downwind and you're questionable, like, you know, Patrick mentioned that 5 knots of boat speed. We weren't really ever there this weekend. So, okay. Well, unless anyone has any questions on the wing, any questions real quick? Okay, Patrick, you mentioned you might want to talk about the basically the in-haul to not in-haul. Is that something you still want to talk about?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I listened to the debrief on the first day.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of talk about the big breeze and in-hauling and what to look for. And it got into triangulation and measuring things, which we do in our boat, which is good to do. But I thought we might be able to simplify it a little bit. I mean, the jibs the way they are now, you are definitely weather sheeting even in the breeze. And right where the non-skid meets the shiny part of the deck on the cabin house, that's pretty much, you're always right around there. You're usually inside a little bit or outside a little bit. I think what I listen for upwind, so it was big breeze, like Sunday, like Friday, you definitely want weather sheet, but if you leave it on too long, it's not going to go well. So I'll actually hike with the weather sheet in my backhand a little bit. And basically, I'm always listening. If the main breaks up for more than like 2 seconds, I'm immediately using the weather sheet at least 50%. And then as soon as the main settled down, the weather sheet's coming right back on. I think that I had a couple people ask me, when do you know it's too much, when is it not? I think it's important for the jib trimmers to talk to the main trimmer regularly. I'm always asking Morgan or Victor or whoever, hey, can you take more weather sheet? Am I getting too into your main? And then in the big breeze, I'm always listening for the main to break up for too long and then immediately using the weather sheet. And if you do it right, you'll be in a group of boats. And if they don't get their weather sheets off, they just go straight sideways. That's a pretty big gainer pretty fast. But you have to be quite active with it because I don't think in the big breeze, you can't really move the main sheet in and out that much. It's just too hard. So you can get away with playing the weather sheet more than you think to kind of control the jib.
So Patrick, are you saying you are already, you're in hauled, but then you have it behind your back, and so then you pull it in, like kind of next to your body, and then you go back and forth like that?
Yeah, I'll kind of banjo at my backhand, and I'll set it to, let's say, 60 to 70% of what I think the max weather sheet would be. And then I can kind of pull it on, say we hit a lull or, flat water, or, at the right time, you kind of pull it on, and then you're also ready to let it off and get a big puff. Now, if it's like Sunday and you get like a 25 knot giant gust and the main starts blowing up like crazy, I'll completely blow the weather sheet off till the main's quieted back down.
Yeah, does that make sense to everybody? We have any other jib trimmers? I don't know who's trimming on, or Zeke can jump in. Who's trimming on your boat? Is it Felder or go ahead, Willem? Go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, so just kind of talking with what Patrick, they do a very good job all over the boat. It's not just the trimming, it's the communication about the puffs. it's Joel has a fantastic angle of heel feel. So he keeps the boat the perfect angle of heel. And Patrick has set that in-haul to he's cleated it on the weather side to the max ease. And then he's reaching in front and he's playing it. So whenever he goes off, that's as easy as he would ever want it. Okay. So then once it gets a little more windier, now we're in-hauling potentially less and less. So you got to make sure that the lead, it's like in a J24, the lead actually starts to go forward, because you don't want to have the lead way back and get a big puff and blow the sheet, and there's nothing home there because the whole top of the jib is gone. So there might be a point where, oh, it's getting a little windier, I'm in-hauling a little less as a whole, so I'm going to go lead forward a tiny bit because I'm trending to in-haul less. Just like in the light air, as we in-haul less, we have to go lead forward. So it's just something to think about. But it's a loop, a communication loop, and he's listening to the main. A great team with a great guy calling the breeze could almost, the driver could close his eyes and the angle of heel would be really good if the communication was great. So if you can do the communication great, the driving great, the playing the weather sheet, like Patrick was saying, he's listening to the main, he hears it break up and he eases. And of course, hiking is important. So the more you play that weather, if your hand is in playing that weather sheet, but you're not really playing it much, is your arm worth being there? I sometimes ask myself, maybe I should be hiking with both arms out and just try to really do a little bit better job calling the breeze. So it's just trying to find that happy medium.
Can I ask a related question that I thought about earlier?
Yeah, go ahead.
Willem, it's Rob. So I haven't heard a lot of your opinions about this. I've heard from some other folks. And do you recommend having two 200-pound people hiking? I got to believe being 170 legs in is a little faster. But do you want two 200-pound guys hiking in front of me, or what do you recommend?
I mean, the dream weight would be, Victor and Lucas driving in tactics, and two of the big, Stocke and myself hiking. That's what you want. You want 400 pounds on the rail and as close to 300 pounds back. But it's hard to do.
That's
right?
That's not my dream.
Right. Be a lot of talk on the boat.
Thank you.
But
yeah, so I think the answer there is, if you can get close to 400 pounds on the rail, that's pretty important.
The trick, Robbie, is the beauty of having more weight on the rail is the overall weight of the boat can be less. And then you're going to go faster downwind. So if we can have 400 pounds on the rail, but have two light guys in the back, the overall weight can be somewhere around 675, 680, light. But
We've actually talked about on our boat that's a nice thing for the ladies. Having the ladies in the back of the boat has got to be fast, and they're awfully good in this class. So.
Yeah, if they're driving or playing the main well, that's a great combo.
Yep.
Light
so
in the back.
There's one question that goes along with this is heel, and what heel angle are you telling your driver you want to be? Do you use a gauge? I know we had a conversation, and Jonathan was involved with this. You want a digital one, but sometimes people have just the little ball thing. What heel angle are you guys looking for, especially in this conditions we had this past weekend? Jonathan, did you have a specific one you were looking for?
I'm not as familiar with the numbers. I think some of the other guys could probably give you good numbers. What is noticeable to me is the steadiness of heel angle. I see the fastest boats, even though they may have slight variations in their angle of heel, they're maintaining constant heel really well through the puff well sequence. Which as Willem alluded to, it's a combination of really good wind calls and possibly some in-haul ease on the bigger puffs. And also, I think just the helmsman not being afraid to be a little more aggressive with the helm in these puff well sequences to keep the boat flat.
Yeah, so basically what he's saying is the consistent heel is most important. And so if you're keeping a consistent heel the whole time, you're going to eventually dial in the perfect one and figure out numbers, but obviously different conditions call for different things. The other side with that is, the bow guy or whoever's calling wind, calling those puffs in so that the jib trimmer can do their thing when the puff hits, the main trimmer can do their thing when the puff hits. So the heel stays the same. Go ahead, Patrick.
If I can jump in there, I would say over the last year and a half, maybe 2 years, we've actually started using the heel angle sensor a lot more on the B&G. I know this from 14 to 16 degrees upwind, maybe 12 even at times. And the other place where we've really found a great use for the heel angle is in light air. It's really easy in light air to sail with too much heel or too little heel. I know for us, if we go flatter than say like 8 degrees when you're not all hiking, the boat just gets really hard to sail because you have no helm. The heel angle is just a good thing to keep an eye on.
Yeah. Yep. Does anyone else have any input on that heel angle?
Yeah, this is Zeke here. I agree with Patrick. I think using that instrument is really become super important. I agree with the 8 degrees, or is the max flat you would go on the light stuff. I think in the stuff we had on Sunday, you're feeling like if you're able to be at 14 to 16, that probably explains why they're going so fast. On our team, we're thinking if we're at 16, that's pretty good. If we're living in the high teens, but it's steady, we're happy. And the minute you start seeing 20s, something's wrong. So that's kind of an easy gauge to think about in the big breeze when you're overpowered.
Yeah. So basically one other thing also happens, obviously, if your keel's not straight up and down, you're going to slide sideways a little more.
Yeah. This is Travis. I agree with Zeke, Patrick, and Willem on this heel angle thing. And as a driver, I can't press enough how important the heel angle to have it on a display is for you. I mean, like if I'm driving, I know that we've kind of figured out like 6 to 8 degrees in light air, bumping up to 10 to 12 in medium air, and then I don't like to go over 16 degrees in heavy air if I can help it. But as a driver, I'm almost looking at that more than the telltales or anything else, because if you're set at your proper heel angle, most likely the boat's set in its proper gear and groove to go through the water. So really, as a driver or just a speed guy, I would really focus on that. I mean, that's almost like, as a driver, 75% of the time I'm looking at that, and then really talking to the crew about what I need. So huge tool. Sorry.
No, that's great. And if you're looking at these videos that Roy is showing right now, you can see the mast, you can see, the angles for the most part, and you can see a boat, in the back, that's a little more heeled. The biggest thing with all this when you're going up wind and tuning is look around, and try to match, the guy next to you, especially if it's one of these guys that's talking. And that's going to get you up the fleet a lot more. If you're hearing numbers, which are great, and we do have the tools to get the specific numbers, but the more important thing is sail with somebody else. Go upwind every once in a while with someone else. Try to do what they're doing. You can see this guy in the back heeling over a lot more. What happens when you heel over? You slide sideways, and you'll lose, that 59-second difference in a leg is, what was difficult and a struggle for, what Kristen was talking about that the data shows. So all great information. We're running a little bit to the end here. We're a little longer on today, but does anyone have any other questions or any comments you want to share before we?
I have something to add.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Willem. So, I think a lot of times out there, what's happening as the breeze picks up is the rig setup, jib lead, main, it's not right. And so sometimes you wonder, wow, Maggie, she's pretty new to sailing. How has she got such a steady angle of heel? Well, the setup is right. So if the rig is tight enough and the lead is right, you're going to be able to make it work. And I'm sure at least half the boats were struggling where this feeling of, boom, we're tipping over, and we're too flat. And then boom, we're tipping over, and now we're too flat. And why is it doing that? is the driver just asleep back there, or what's going on? And so often it's not the driver's fault, it's the setup. And so if it tends to do that, what's typically the problem is the forestay is too loose and the main is too deep. So what happens is all of a sudden the power heads the boat up, and then we just can't control. So when the boat is really like a wild donkey, you know, it's just out of control. Usually what's happening is we don't have the backstay tight enough and the rig tight enough. So often I see someone like that, and I see the course tune is too loose and their backstay is all the way down, and they have really like 40% the backstay that our team. So when the boat gets really unstable, you can get away with it if you have enough backstay to pull, even if your rig is too loose. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great, Willem. And what he's talking about also is make sure your boat's set up right. You know, if your backstay is super long, you know, we're now allowed to shorten them some. Then you also have the course tune that, you know, you need to make sure that changes too. And, you know, here's the biggest thing. Ask these guys, you know, in between races, none of these guys are going to not say, hey, we're here, you know, because they want everyone to be, you know, they want the competition. They want everyone to succeed and get up the race course. That's why we're all here and doing this. So, you know, we do this all the time with our tuning partners or with just guys we know, you know, because they're willing. We say, hey, where were you that rig, you know, that setup? Where was your rig? And they're gonna tell you. So I think that's pretty important, and why this class is, and we're all doing what we're doing is, you know what, Kristen made the comment that, you know, from race 1 to race 2, people seem to get things dialed in a little more, and I'm sure people were asking, you know, where they were, you know, with other boats. So go and ask and talk, and you know, even in the big races, you can't talk to a coach in the big races, but you can talk to another boat, and they're more than willing to help. A lot of these guys are going to be your sailmaker or your you know, a coach, or going to jump on your boat every once in a while, and so they want you to succeed too. So unless anyone else has anything else, I mean, this is awesome, and I really appreciate everyone getting on and making this great. We have another event in March in Tampa that I know a lot of people have already signed up for. And then we have another one in March in Miami that we have a lot of people signed up for. So I think we're in a pretty good situation. If you know another team that wants to come do things, go ahead and invite them and send them our way, and we can get you out there to do these. So
yeah, Ed, it's Jonathan. I know I'm speaking for all of us. I'm gonna give you a big thanks. I mean, 13 races. I can't remember a regatta where we ever had 13 races. So that was pretty awesome. Great training and great debriefs. Really well organized, and it felt pretty safe as well. So thanks very much for all you do.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah, agreed.
Thanks, everyone. And looking forward to the next ones, and really appreciate everything. We'll get this up online if you want to share with anyone else too that's not here. And we are all set. So thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Ed. Great job, everyone.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, guys.